You think you know who you are because you have 4 letters to prove it? But what if those letters aren't your identity? They're your adaptation. What if your type isn't a reflection of your soul, but the mask you built to survive what happened to it? You didn't choose this personality. You survived into it. And Carl Jung never meant for you to stay there. This isn't a video about types. It's about the self you buried underneath one. The MBTI test, short for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, breaks people down into one of 16 types. It's based loosely on Carl Jung's theory of psychological types, but it simplifies it into 4 letters. Introvert or extrovert, sensor or intuitive, thinker or feeler, judger or perceiver. Over 100 million people have taken the test, and for many, it brings clarity. But clarity isn't always truth. Jung's original theory wasn't meant to define who you are. It was meant to describe how your energy moves and what parts of you you've left behind. At some point, you took the test. 4 letters, 16 boxes, a promise of self-understanding wrapped in a neat acronym. Maybe it said INTJ and something clicked. You finally understood why you always felt different. Or maybe it said ENFP and you felt seen, even celebrated for your scattered, brilliant energy. And let's be honest, maybe it helped. Maybe it made you feel like you weren't broken, just wired differently. And that's beautiful, truly. But beneath the relief, something else stirred. A quiet sense that maybe this type wasn't a truth, but a cage you agreed to because it made your confusion easier to carry. What if this label was survival, not identity? This isn't a video about types. It's a video about the part of you that had to disappear for a type to exist. So let's slow down and look at what these 4 letters actually mean. And by the end of this video, you won't just understand your type. You'll understand why your soul rejected every box you've tried to fit into, and why real freedom begins the moment you stop protecting your label and start confronting the self you buried to wear it. But first, before we go deeper, let's return to the surface. Because to break the illusion, we first have to understand how it was built. Each letter in MBTI comes from a forced choice between 2 psychological opposites. The first letter is either I or E. I stands for introvert. E stands for extrovert. But forget the stereotypes. This isn't about being shy or outgoing. It's about energy. Do you regenerate energy from solitude or social connection? Introverts are thought to be quiet, withdrawn. Extroverts, talkative and bold. But Jung warned, this isn't about behavior. It's about energy flow. You can be an introvert who's loud and commanding, or an extrovert who's socially anxious. The real question is, what empties you and what fills you? Then comes the second letter, S or N. S stands for sensing. N stands for intuition. This one asks, how do you take in information? Do you trust concrete facts or abstract possibilities? Sensors live in what's real, what's observable, what's now. Intuitives live in symbols, patterns, meanings, and potentials. The ISTJ may memorize every detail. The ENFP dreams 10 futures before breakfast. Neither is better, but each sees a different world. The third letter, T or F. T is for thinking. F is for feeling. And no, this isn't about logic versus emotion. It's about how you make decisions. Thinkers step back. They ask, what makes the most sense? Feelers step in. They ask, what matters the most to me or to others? A thinker might end a relationship to protect their future. A feeler might stay to protect someone's heart. It's not about being smart or soft. It's about what you trust when it's time to choose. Do you lead with logic or values? Thinkers seek clarity. They dissect, deduce, and decide. Feelers seek harmony. They empathize, absorb, and respond. But this isn't about IQ or emotional softness. A thinker can cry in private. A feeler can win in court. It's about what guides you when the stakes are high. And the last letter, J or P. J means judging. P means perceiving. This one asks, how do you deal with the unknown? Do you prefer structure or spontaneity? Judgers want closure. Perceivers want freedom. A J craves control, deadlines, decisions, plans, clarity, systems. A P craves options, Adaptability, flow, discovery, possibility. But both can be organized. Both can be chaotic. Neither is better. It just depends. What makes you feel safe? So when you say you're an INTJ, what you're really saying is, I tend to focus inward. I trust abstract meaning. I choose logic, and I like having control. But here's the question Jung would ask. Did you choose that, or did your pain choose it for you? Because here's what most people don't know. Carl Jung never wanted you to label yourself. He wanted you to free yourself. His theory of psychological types wasn't made to divide people. It was created to describe the way energy flows through the human soul. But MBTI took that language and turned it into identity. It replaced mystery with definition. And slowly we started using our type, not as a map for growth, but as a mask for survival. MBTI became a costume, and eventually we forgot who we were before we wore it. Jung laid the groundwork for personality theory, but MBTI is a corporate simplification, a brand, not a breakthrough. This video isn't here to take away what you love about your type. It's here to ask one thing. What part of you had to be exiled for that type to exist? Carl Jung's original typology wasn't about traits or behavior. It was about energy, libido, as he called it, moving either inward or outward. Introversion, for Jung, was the direction of psychic energy into the inner world of symbols, ideas, and meaning. Extroversion was the flow of energy outward, toward people, action, and objects. It had nothing to do with confidence or shyness. You could be an introvert and light up a room. You could be an extrovert and fear public speaking. The key was, where does your energy regenerate? MBTI reduced this nuance into social preferences. It confused surface behavior with inner orientation. It taught people that being quiet means introverted, or that liking people means extroverted. But Jung never said that. In fact, he warned that when we confuse how we act with how we are, we sever ourselves from the unconscious. And the unconscious is where your soul keeps the parts you've forgotten. Let's be blunt. Most people who call themselves INTJ aren't naturally cold, logical masterminds. They're people who had to become self-sufficient at a young age because no one showed up emotionally when it mattered. Most people who call themselves INFJ don't walk through life as mystical unicorns. They're people who've been deeply misunderstood and learned to disappear behind insight and intuition. And that ENFP who lights up every room, they might be terrified of being alone with themselves. We don't type ourselves based on who we are. We type ourselves based on what we survived. That's the secret no one tells you. The type becomes the myth we tell to make sense of the wounds we don't want to reopen. There's a woman I once knew who prided herself on being ISTP, calm, detached, independent. She said emotions were inefficient, that relationships were just distractions. But underneath the cool precision was a terrified little girl who learned too early that vulnerability led to pain. Her type was a fortress, not a fingerprint. So the question is not, what type are you? It's, what pain made that type necessary? To understand the depth of Jung's system, we have to go beyond letters and into the functions, the true language of the psyche. Most people have no idea what this really means. So here's the simplest way to understand it. Introverted thinking, TI, turns inward to dissect and refine internal logic. The INTP or ISTP constantly asks, does this make sense to me? Extroverted thinking, TE, projects outward to organize systems and outcomes. The ENTJ or ESTJ thinks, what's the most effective way to get this done? Introverted feeling, Phi, internally evaluates what feels right based on personal values. INFPs and ISFPs may seem quiet, but inside they're burning with conviction. Extroverted feeling, FE, tunes into the emotional atmosphere and adjusts for harmony. ENFJs or ESFJs sense what everyone needs, even when no one says it out loud. Introverted intuition, NI, looks inward for hidden meanings and future insights. INTJs and INFJs don't guess the future. They feel it in patterns beneath the surface. Extroverted intuition, NE, scans the outer world for possibilities, connections, and patterns. ENFPs and ENTPs can jump from one idea to the next like lightning. Introverted sensing, psi, preserves internal memory and tradition. ISTJs and ISFJs feel safest in what is proven, familiar, and dependable. Extroverted sensing, SC, focuses on external details, immediacy, and the physical now. ESTPs and ESFPs are present, reactive, and instinctively in tune with their surroundings. Each person has 4 core functions, 2 conscious, 2 less so. Your dominant function is the one you live through. It feels natural, obvious. But your inferior function, that's the buried one, the one you don't trust, the one you avoid. But it's also the key to your wholeness. Let's make this concrete. INTJs lead with introverted intuition, NI. They see the future, but often repress extroverted feeling, FE. That means they may struggle with group dynamics, softening their delivery, or adapting in real time. ENFPs lead with extroverted intuition, NI. They light up rooms with ideas, but their inferior introverted sensing, psi, can leave them untethered, forgetful, or blind to patterns from their own past. ISTJs lead with introverted sensing, SI. They value duty, tradition, and clarity, but often repress extroverted intuition, NE, making them wary of change or innovation. Jung believed that the path to wholeness is not in mastering your dominant function. It's in integrating your opposite. It's in learning to speak the language of your shadow function, not to become it, but to become bigger than your box. But MBTI doesn't teach that. It teaches you to double down, to specialize, to narrow yourself into efficiency. And that's how the type becomes a tomb. If you've ever felt like your growth is stuck, like you're great at being one version of yourself, but terrified of becoming another, pause now, subscribe. We're not done yet. You don't cling to your type because it's true. You cling to it because it explains your pain. It gives shape to the chaos. It puts clean words on messy wounds. It lets you hold on to a story that made your suffering make sense. You say you're an INTJ because it's easier than saying you stopped feeling a decade ago. You say you're an ENFP because if you slow down, the silence will eat you alive. You say you're an INFJ because it feels safer to be rare than to be lonely. And no one tells you that these types aren't your soul. They're your defense mechanisms with better branding. Because here's the thing Jung knew, and MBTI forgot. Every personality structure is also a compensation. You became logical because your feelings weren't safe. You became independent because closeness hurt you. You became flexible because stability was stolen from you. And that compensation always creates a shadow, not just a repressed function, but a full-blown mirror version of you. The parts you secretly envy, shame, avoid, or attack in others. Those are clues. You call someone too emotional? That's probably your buried FE. You roll your eyes at someone's messiness or impulsivity? That's your disowned C. You mock someone's obsession with planning? That might be your repressed C crying out to be held. The shadow function isn't weak. It's the part of your psyche you had to amputate to be accepted. And now it shows up in projection, in the people who irritate you, in the patterns you keep repeating, in the things you pretend you're above, but secretly long for. You're not really rejecting them. You're rejecting the buried part of yourself that wants to feel, but you disowned it years ago to survive. Every type has a shadow, not just as a repressed function, but as a feared identity, a version of yourself that feels wrong, shameful, even dangerous, because at some point the world taught you that becoming that would make you unlovable. The INTP who shames emotional people might secretly crave deep connection, but doesn't trust themselves to hold it without drowning. The ESFJ who micromanages everyone may fear that without control, they'll be abandoned like they were before. The ENTJ who leads without mercy may be terrified of being irrelevant, forgotten, or unloved. And so they compensate by dominating every room. You don't just fear becoming the opposite of your type, you resent people who are that way, because they mirror the part of you you're trying to kill. You call someone flaky? That's your repressed perceiving nature trying to breathe. You roll your eyes at tryhards? That's your buried judging function, craving direction. You distance yourself from dreamers? That might be your exiled intuition, aching to imagine again. The shadow type isn't some strange opposite out there in the world. It's you, the parts of you you never got to live, the emotions you weren't allowed to express, the chaos you weren't safe enough to explore, the sensitivity you learned to mock before someone else could mock it first. And the danger isn't in having a shadow. The danger is in identifying too much with your persona, the mask you wear as your type. Carl Jung warned us with terrifying clarity. You become neurotic when you identify too much with one function and repress its opposite. Why? Because the soul does not obey personality boxes. It's not linear. It's not symmetrical. It's not loyal to the mask you built to survive. The soul wants to integrate, to pull in what was banished, to break the script. And if this part stirred something real in you, something uncomfortable but true, then you're exactly where you need to be. Stay with us. Subscribe. We don't offer identity. We offer mirrors. I once met a man who lived as an ISTJ for 40 years. Accountant, reliable, stoic, efficient. He wore structure like armor and pride like a second skin. But when his wife left him, something shattered. Suddenly, the routines that once gave him purpose now felt like cages. He started dreaming in color, writing poetry. He didn't recognize himself. He thought he was breaking down. But he wasn't breaking down. He was breaking open. These stories happen more often than we realize. Quiet, slow implosions behind closed doors. The ESTJ who has a panic attack after years of performance and begins sketching alone at night, rediscovering her long-buried fee. The INFP who's always been gentle and understanding, until one day their buried T lashes out with surgical precision, cutting through years of passive resentment. The INFJ who's given and given and given, until their knee turns inward and asks, "But who am I when no one needs me?" These aren't personality changes. They're integration events. They're what Jung called the confrontation with the unconscious. Moments when the part of you you've spent your whole life avoiding suddenly walks in and sits beside you and refuses to leave. This isn't a glitch in your system. It's the soul reclaiming its other half. And it's terrifying because it feels like you're losing control, like you're going backwards, like you're becoming a stranger to yourself. But maybe that's the point, because the part of you you've always called you was often just the part that got rewarded, got praised, got picked, got protected. But the real you, the deeper you, that's the part that waited. The one who got buried under roles and preferences and patterns you mistook for identity. And sometimes it takes heartbreak, burnout, illness, or crisis for that real you to resurface. Jung never said it would feel good. He said it would feel whole. So what do you do now? You stop asking what you are and start asking what you've been afraid to become. Because Jung's invitation was never to define yourself. It was to confront yourself, to walk straight into the shadow, to learn the language of your opposite, to stop hiding behind 4 letters and start the slow, excruciating, sacred work of individuation. You are not your type. You are not a category, a content bubble, or a social strategy. You are not the trauma pattern you branded as preference. You are not just a thinker or a feeler or a planner or a dreamer. You are the chaos underneath the clarity, the silence beneath the mask, the longing behind the persona you perfected. You are every function you were told not to be. You are every possibility you buried so you could be loved. And maybe, just maybe, the part of you you've avoided the longest is the exact part that could set you free. So I'll leave you with this. What would happen if you stopped protecting your type and finally met yourself? If this video helped you remember something deeper, some hidden voice beneath the role you've played, then stay with us. Subscribe. We're not here to make your personality stronger. We're here to make your soul whole. And if you feel brave enough, leave a comment below. What part of yourself have you always feared becoming, but secretly longed to explore?